this lecture, I will walk you through the SDKs and the APIs that we'll be using to implement this use case. Here, the event source is API gateway. I'm going to create two Lambda functions. Earlier in the Lambda invocation lecture, you have learned that we can trigger a Lambda function not only from the console, not only from the CLI, but also from SDK. So for every component, there is an SDK. We can use that SDK and the APIs it gives programmatically and invoke the Lambda function. That is one use of SDKs. The second use is we can use the APIs provided by these SDK within our Lambda code to communicate with other components like S3, DynamoDB, API gateway, and even SNS. In this particular use case, we need to communicate with DynamoDB. So whenever our Lambda function is triggered by an API gateway event as a result of an end user hitting a API gateway URL, our Lambda function needs to communicate with DynamoDB. That is where when you create a project in the pom.xml, you are going to add the AWS Java SDK hyphen DynamoDB. Every component in AWS has its own SDK. So depending on which component we want to work with or communicate with from within our Lambda function, we simply add that SDK and start using the classes and methods that are available within that SDK. In addition to that, you will be using the AWS Lambda Java events because this library will have all the POJOs. When an event is triggered by API gateway in this case, the information that comes from the client and the event information itself will be put into a Java object and that will be handed over to the Lambda. That POJO, instead of we creating that POJO, it is already available in AWS Lambda Java events. We can also create our own POJOs if we want to. So once you add these two dependencies within your code, it is super easy to communicate with the DynamoDB. For creating an order, your Lambda function will receive a API gateway proxy request event. This request will have the information which a client sends to create an order with the order ID, item name, and quantity. And the API gateway will forward that request when it triggers the Lambda function. So we receive request.getBody will give us that JSON data. We use Jackson object mapper. So you're going to add Jackson libraries to your project, which can serialize and deserialize JSON data. Once the JSON data comes, we take the request body, convert it into a order object, the order model object. You are going to create it. Once converted, you will use the data within that order object to save that data into a DynamoDB table as an item. So you create a DynamoDB client. See this DynamoDB? This is from the SDK that you have added here. Create a client. On that client, we have API. In this case, it is DynamoDB client. So get table will get us access to the table in the DynamoDB database, the orders table. And then you create an item object using the data that is sent by the client and you put that item into that table. It's that simple. And then you return a response back. The response again is a POJO, API gateway proxy response event. This POJO again comes from this AWS Lambda Java events. So most of the projects will have these events, the source which is triggering the Lambda will send the data in the form of an event and we send back an event, and then the dependency for accessing another component within AWS through the SDK. So this is the create orders, very simple. Similarly, read orders. In read orders Lambda, the second Lambda function, when this guy is triggered by the API gateway, we are going to use the DynamoDB one more time. This time we'll be using the scan method instead of put. This time we want to scan and get all the results back from the database. We pass in a scan request, which can have the where clauses, the filters, the table name, etc. In this case, we simply pass the table name. It's going to scan that table, get us a list of orders. So scan result will give us all the items. We are going to stream it and convert it into a list of orders. Then we use the object mapper to serialize that onto the wire, put it inside API gateway proxy response event and send that back, which will eventually go back to the API gateway and from there to the client. So two key things to take away from this lecture. You're going to use this events, which has all the POJOs for the events that are fired and the events to return from the Lambda function, and SDK. Every component in AWS has a SDK that will give you API to communicate with it from other components. In this case, the other component is a Lambda function.